I am Felicia, 68 years old, and last Christmas my only son Thomas told me I was not welcome at his home for the holidays. After years of helping with their $450,000 mortgage and countless other expenses, I should have been crushed. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and drove home without argument. Little did Thomas know that my calm reaction would trigger a financial earthquake in his life. 2 days after I canceled my half of their mortgage payment, my phone exploded with 18 frantic missed calls. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from today? Take a second to share in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about setting boundaries with ungrateful children. Life has not always been easy for me. 15 years ago, my husband John died unexpectedly from a heart attack, leaving me a widow at 53. We had built a modest middle-class life in suburban Chicago, nothing extravagant but comfortable enough. The most precious part of our lives was our only child Thomas, who was 28 when his father passed away. I had essentially raised him alone during his teenage years while John worked long hours at the manufacturing plant to provide for us. Those early years as a single mother were challenging but filled with purpose. I worked 2 jobs as an administrative assistant during weekdays and at a local diner on weekends to ensure Thomas could attend college without drowning in debt. I remember how proud I felt watching him graduate with his business degree, thinking all those double shifts and missed social events had been worth every sacrifice. A mother wants nothing more than to see her child succeed, and I believed Thomas was on his way. 8 years ago, Thomas married Amanda, a pretty and ambitious woman he met through work. She had a marketing background and strong opinions about everything from politics to how to properly load a dishwasher. I tried from the beginning to build a warm relationship with my new daughter-in-law, wanting to respect their marriage, while still maintaining my close bond with my son. The early years seemed promising, with regular Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations together. My grandchildren came along soon after, first Jackson, now 7, and then little Lily, who just turned 5. Becoming a grandmother filled an emptiness in my heart that had been there since John died. Those first visits to the hospital holding those tiny bundles, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and family connection. I threw myself into grandmotherhood with enthusiasm, babysitting whenever asked, buying thoughtful gifts within my budget, and trying to create meaningful traditions the children would remember. It was around the time Lily was born that Thomas and Amanda began struggling financially. They had purchased a starter home when they first married, but with 2 children they wanted something larger in a better school district. Housing prices in their desired neighborhood were steep, especially for a young family, with Amanda having reduced her work hours to part-time. Thomas called me one evening, his voice strained, explaining they had found the perfect house, but were being turned down for the mortgage. I still remember sitting at my kitchen table, looking at photos of the beautiful colonial-style home they had sent: 4 bedrooms, a fenced backyard for the kids, and excellent schools nearby. It was exactly the kind of stable environment I had always wanted to provide for Thomas growing up. When he hesitantly asked if I would consider co-signing the mortgage, I agreed without much hesitation. The house cost $450,000, an enormous sum that made me nervous, but Thomas assured me their combined income could handle most of the payments. Our arrangement was that I would contribute $1,200 monthly toward their mortgage payment, half of the total due each month. This was no small amount for me, living on a fixed income from my pension and Social Security. My own modest ranch-style home had been paid off years ago, thankfully, but property taxes and rising utility costs were already stretching my budget thin. Still, what grandmother could say no to helping provide a beautiful home for her grandchildren? Every month for the past 4 years, I had faithfully transferred my portion into Thomas and Amanda's account. I never missed a payment, even when my furnace needed replacing last winter, and I had to dip into my emergency savings. My financial planner, Barbara, had gently suggested I reconsider this arrangement several times, pointing out that I was potentially compromising my own long-term security. But I always dismissed her concerns, saying, "Family comes first." As this Christmas approached, I had carefully budgeted to buy special gifts for Jackson and Lily. For Jackson, I found a telescope he had been talking about for months, his budding interest in astronomy reminding me so much of his grandfather. For Lily, I had commissioned a custom dollhouse from a local craftsman, painted in her favorite colors with tiny furniture I had selected piece by piece. These gifts represented months of small sacrifices, skipping my weekly hair appointments and choosing store-brand groceries instead of name brands. Beyond the gifts, I had been planning our traditional Christmas meal since October. Every year, I prepared John's mother's special Swedish meatballs, homemade cranberry sauce from berries I froze during their brief season, and my signature apple pie with the flakiest crust that Thomas had loved since childhood. The refrigerator was already stocked with ingredients, and I had started prepping some dishes that could be frozen ahead of time. When Thomas called 3 weeks before Christmas, I assumed he was confirming our usual arrangements. Would I be coming over Christmas Eve or Christmas Day? Should I bring my traditional sides, or was Amanda planning something different this year? I was already mentally reviewing my recipes and thinking about which serving dishes to use as I answered his call. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about Christmas this year." Thomas began, his voice carrying an unusual hesitation that immediately set off warning bells in my mind. There was an awkward pause before he continued. "Amanda and I were thinking we might try something different this year. You know, just have a private Christmas, just us and the kids." I felt my hand tighten around the phone as the implication of his words sank in. "Oh," was all I managed to say at first, my mind racing to understand what he really meant. "It is nothing personal," he hurried to add, his voice taking on that slightly condescending tone he sometimes used when he thought I was being overly sensitive. "We just thought it might be nice to establish some of our own traditions, you know. Just the 4 of us. Maybe you could visit sometime after New Year's instead." I sat down heavily at my kitchen table, the Christmas cookie recipes I had been reviewing now seeming pointless. "I see," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Is everything all right between us, Thomas? Have I done something to upset you or Amanda?" No, nothing like that," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "We just want a quieter holiday this year. The kids get so wound up with too many people around." Too many people? The phrase echoed in my mind. I was being classified as too many people rather than immediate family. When had I become an outsider to my own son and grandchildren? As the conversation continued, I maintained my composure, telling Thomas I understood completely while my heart was breaking inside. After hanging up, I sat in silence for nearly an hour, replaying not just this conversation but the subtle changes in our relationship over the past couple of years. Amanda had been growing increasingly cold toward me, though always maintaining a veneer of politeness. There was the time last Easter when I brought my traditional deviled eggs, and she mentioned they were trying to eat clean now, setting my contribution aside, while prominently displaying her own organic vegetable platter. Or the time I offered to take Lily shopping for school clothes, and Amanda said they preferred to handle that themselves because they had specific preferences about the children's wardrobes. Thomas's calls had grown shorter and less frequent. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, often cutting conversations short with vague excuses about needing to run errands or help Amanda with something around the house. Our once-weekly Sunday dinners had dwindled to monthly, then bi-monthly, and lately had been canceled more often than not. It had become increasingly obvious that Amanda controlled most family decisions. Thomas, who had once been so close to me now, seemed to filter everything through his wife's preferences. I had tried to be understanding, remembering how I, too, had wanted to establish independence from my in-laws when first married. But this felt different, more deliberate and hurtful than normal boundary setting. Over the years, I had made numerous attempts to connect with Amanda, inviting her to lunch, asking about her work and interests, even trying to learn about her passion for organic gardening despite my complete lack of a green thumb. My efforts were always met with polite but firm resistance, as if she were keeping me at arm's length intentionally. Still, I told myself to be understanding. Young parents are under tremendous pressure, and I should not take their need for space personally. So I swallowed my hurt and called Thomas back later that evening to reassure him. "I've been thinking about Christmas," I said brightly, "and I completely understand you wanting your own family time. Would it be all right if I drop off the children's gifts beforehand?" Thomas sounded relieved, probably having expected more resistance. "Sure, Mom, that would be fine. Maybe the weekend before." After hanging up, I went to the spare bedroom where I had been storing the carefully wrapped telescope and dollhouse. I ran my fingers over the festive paper and ribbons, wondering if the children would ever know how much thought had gone into selecting these gifts. Then I went to the kitchen and put away the special Swedish meatball ingredients, some of which would spoil before I would have a chance to use them now. That evening was one of the loneliest I had experienced since John's death. The thought of spending Christmas Day alone in my house while my only family celebrated without me was almost unbearable. I tried to distract myself with television, but every channel seemed to be showing holiday movies, featuring happy extended families gathered around dinner tables and Christmas trees. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my friend Susan calling to check if I needed a ride to the community center for our weekly bridge game the following day. "I was just thinking about Christmas, too," Susan mentioned casually. "Are you spending it at Thomas's place again this year? You always talk about how much fun you have with the grandkids opening presents." "Actually, no," I admitted, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Thomas and Amanda want to have a private family Christmas this year." There was a pause on the line before Susan responded. "That's strange. When I ran into Amanda at the grocery store yesterday, she was telling me how they're hosting this big family Christmas dinner and invited me to stop by for dessert. She said, and I quote, 'The more the merrier.' I felt as if I had been doused with ice water. You were invited to their Christmas?" "Yes," she said, "they're having her parents, her sister and brother-in-law, plus a few friends from the neighborhood. I assumed you would be there too, of course." After ending the call with Susan, I sat in stunned silence. Not a private nuclear family Christmas after all, but a large gathering from which only I, the mother and grandmother, had been specifically excluded. A sick feeling of betrayal washed over me as I began to suspect there was something much more deliberate about my exclusion than Thomas had led me to believe. The next morning, with Susan's revelations still burning in my mind, I did something I rarely do. I logged onto Facebook and navigated to Amanda's profile. We were friends in the technical sense, though she rarely responded to my comments or messages. What I found there only deepened my pain. Amanda had posted just yesterday, "So excited for our big family Christmas this year. The house will be full of love and laughter with everyone together." The post had dozens of likes and comments, including one from her mother saying how excited they were to fly in from Arizona for the whole family gathering. There were photos of elaborate table-setting ideas, pine garlands being strung along their staircase, and even a meal planning spreadsheet with assignments for different guests. Amanda's sister was bringing wine and appetizers. Her father was in charge of carving the turkey. Her best friend Jenna was handling desserts. It was clearly going to be a substantial gathering, completely contradicting what Thomas had told me about wanting a quiet, private Christmas. As I scrolled further, I found older posts showcasing shopping trips for new holiday decorations, including expensive-looking mercury glass ornaments and a custom wreath for their front door that I knew must have cost several $100. All this while Thomas had called just last month saying they were struggling to make their mortgage payment and could I possibly contribute a little extra just until after the holidays. The betrayal cut deep, but it also forced me to confront some painful truths I had been avoiding. This wasn't just about Christmas. Over the past few years, I had become little more than a financial resource for Thomas and Amanda, a ready source of funds whenever they faced a shortfall or wanted something beyond their means. Beyond the monthly mortgage contribution, there had been so many other expenses I had covered. There was the $15,000 loan for Thomas's new car 3 years ago, which he had promised to repay in monthly installments that somehow never materialized. "Business has been slow this quarter, Mom, can we skip this month?" had become a regular refrain until eventually the repayments stopped altogether, and we both pretended the loan had never existed. Last year, when their roof developed a leak during heavy spring rains, I had immediately written a check for $8,000 for repairs, waving away Thomas's half-hearted mention of paying me back. "That's what family is for," I had said, ignoring the fact that my own roof was aging and would soon need replacement as well. For the past 2 years, I had been contributing $500 monthly toward Jackson and Lily's childcare expenses, an arrangement that was supposed to be temporary when Amanda reduced her work hours, but had somehow become permanent. I never complained, telling myself I was investing in my grandchildren's well-being and development. Yet amid all these financial struggles they claimed to have, there had been some puzzling expenditures. Just 3 months ago, Thomas had posted photos from a luxury resort in Hawaii, a much-needed getaway for him and Amanda, while the children stayed with her parents. The beachfront suite and helicopter tour they had taken certainly hadn't suggested financial hardship. And then there was Amanda's new luxury SUV purchased just last month, according to the proud photo she had posted of herself standing beside it in the dealership showroom. "Finally got my dream car," the caption had read, garnering congratulatory comments from friends and family. That same week, Thomas had called to say they were short on their mortgage payment again. As these realizations piled up, I began to feel physically ill. My chest tightened, and I developed a pounding headache that no amount of aspirin seemed to touch. Was I nothing more than an ATM to my own son? Had our relationship devolved into a purely transactional arrangement where my value was measured solely by my financial contributions? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake reviewing years of interactions, seeing them in a harsh new light. The way Thomas always called with such enthusiasm when he needed something then became scarce once the money or favor had been secured. The way visits with my grandchildren seemed to be dangled as rewards for financial assistance, then canceled at the last minute once the funds had been transferred. In a moment of painful clarity, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through months of text messages from Thomas. The pattern was undeniable. "Hey Mom, can you help us out with?" Followed by warm expressions of love and appreciation, then silence until the next request. When was the last time Thomas had called just to check on me, or share something about his life that wasn't a prelude to asking for money? 2 weeks before Thomas's unwelcoming Christmas call, he had stopped by my house briefly to drop off a school photo of Jackson. The visit had lasted less than 20 minutes, with Thomas checking his watch repeatedly and declining my offer of coffee. As he hurried out to beat the traffic, he had accidentally left his phone on my coffee table. I had called out to him, but he was already backing out of the driveway, apparently not hearing me over the sound of his car engine. I had set the phone aside, planning to drop it off at his office the next day since he worked only 15 minutes from my home. While preparing dinner that evening, I heard the phone buzz repeatedly with incoming messages. Not wanting to invade Thomas's privacy, I had initially ignored it. But when the buzzing continued insistently, I grew concerned that it might be something important about the children. When I glanced at the screen, I saw a preview of a message from Amanda that made my blood run cold. "Did you get more money from your mom?" I stood frozen, the phone in my hand, torn between respecting my son's privacy and the sinking feeling that I needed to know what was being said. After several minutes of internal debate with hands shaking, I swiped open the message thread. What I read shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Amanda, did you get more money from your mom? Thomas not yet had to leave before I could bring it up. Going back tomorrow to ask for the roof money. Amanda, make sure you mention Lily being sick again. That always works on her. Thomas, I know how to handle Mom. One sob story about the kids and she breaks out the checkbook, lol. Amanda, thank God for that annoying old lady. She's like an ATM with legs. Thomas, right. And all we have to do is pretend to listen to her boring stories for a few minutes. Amanda, small price to pay. Oh, by the way, I told my parents they can stay in the guest room for Christmas week. Thomas, what about Mom? She always expects to stay over Christmas Eve. Amanda, just tell her we want a private family Christmas this year. She'll buy it. Thomas, she'll be hurt. Christmas is a big deal to her. Amanda, so we need my parents here. They're bringing us that big check for the kitchen renovation. Your mom already pays half our mortgage. We can't ask for more right now. Thomas, I guess you're right. I'll call her tomorrow and make up something. Amanda, perfect. After the holidays, we can play the grandchildren card again to get her to help with the backyard landscaping project. Thomas, she never says no when it's for the children's benefit. Too easy. I couldn't read anymore. The phone slipped from my trembling hands onto the kitchen counter. I barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently, my entire body shaking with shock and grief. Collapsing onto the cold tile floor, I sobbed uncontrollably, great heaving cries that felt ripped from the deepest part of my soul. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my son had been a lie. The loving mother-son bond I had cherished was to him merely a financial arrangement to be exploited. The grandchildren I adored were being used as pawns to manipulate my emotions and open my wallet. My own child saw me as nothing more than a convenience, an annoying old lady whose feelings were irrelevant compared to what I could provide materially. Memories flooded back in agonizing detail. Thomas's first steps, teaching him to ride a bike, staying up all night when he had chickenpox, applying calamine lotion and reading stories until he finally fell asleep, working double shifts to afford the computer he needed for school, the camping trips, birthday parties, graduation celebrations, The day he got married, when I had danced with him at the reception, so proud of the man he had become, or thought he had become. And now this. The ultimate betrayal from the person I loved most in the world. I don't know how long I lay on that bathroom floor, but eventually the sobbing subsided into a dull, throbbing ache. I dragged myself to bed without eating dinner, hoping sleep would provide some escape from the pain. But rest wouldn't come. All I could see when I closed my eyes were those horrible messages, the casual cruelty of their words replaying on an endless loop in my mind. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The raw wound was still there, but alongside it had emerged something else, a burning sense of clarity and resolve. I had spent 15 years since John's death centering my life around Thomas and his family, sacrificing my own financial security and sometimes my dignity in the process. And for what? To be mocked, excluded, and exploited by my own child. As I made my morning coffee with shaking hands, I realized with absolute certainty that something had to change. I could not continue being used this way. Whatever happened next, I would not remain a victim in this story. The question was, what exactly should I do? The answer came to me with surprising clarity as I sat at my kitchen table that morning. December's mortgage payment was due in 3 days. The monthly transfer from my account to theirs had been set up automatically by the bank, but I could cancel it with a phone call. It would be the first time in 4 years I had failed to contribute my half of their housing payment. With a strange sense of calm, I picked up the phone and called my bank. After verifying my identity, I instructed them to cancel the scheduled transfer of $1,200 to Thomas and Amanda's account. The representative asked if this was a one-time cancellation or if I wanted to remove the automatic payment permanently. Permanently, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Next, I called Barbara, my financial advisor, who had long been concerned about my supporting Thomas's mortgage. She didn't hide her relief when I explained my decision to stop the payments. "What about your legal obligations as co-signer?" she asked. "Always practical." That was a valid concern. I called the mortgage company next, explaining my situation in general terms and asking about my options. The representative explained that as co-signer, I was indeed legally responsible if Thomas and Amanda defaulted, but I was under no obligation to make regular contributions. My credit would only be affected if the mortgage went unpaid long enough to be considered delinquent, usually after 30 days. "One missed payment won't trigger any actions from us," the representative assured me, "though of course we'd prefer regular, timely payments." "I understand," I replied, "but this is something my son and his wife need to handle themselves from now on." My next call was to Patricia, an attorney I had consulted a few years back about my will. I scheduled an appointment for the following day to discuss several important changes, removing Thomas as my power of attorney, restructuring my will, and establishing a trust for my grandchildren's education that Thomas could not access or control. Patricia sounded concerned by the urgency in my voice. "Is everything all right, Felicia?" "No," I answered honestly. "But it will be." That afternoon, I visited the local senior center, something I had been meaning to do for months, but had never found the time between babysitting for Thomas and running errands for his family. The center offered various support groups, including one specifically for older adults, navigating difficult family relationships. The next meeting was scheduled for the following evening, and I put it on my calendar. At the support group, I met 3 other women in situations remarkably similar to mine. There was Dorothy, whose daughter had been borrowing money for years with no intention of repayment. Margaret, whose son had moved his family into her home temporarily 3 years ago and now treated her like an unwelcome guest in her own house. And Eleanor, whose adult children fought constantly over who would get her house after she died, sometimes discussing it right in front of her as if she were already gone. We formed an immediate bond, sharing stories and offering each other understanding that only those in similar circumstances could truly provide. When I mentioned being excluded from Christmas while Amanda's entire family was invited, Dorothy reached over and squeezed my hand. "What are you doing for Christmas now?" she asked. I admitted I had no plans, the thought of spending the holiday alone still too painful to fully confront. Eleanor, a spirited 72-year-old with bright silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude, made a suggestion that would change everything. My travel agent just told me about a last-minute deal on a Christmas cruise to the Caribbean. I was thinking of booking it to avoid another holiday of watching my children argue over my china collection. Why don't we all go? The idea seemed outlandish at first. I hadn't taken a vacation in years, always saving my money for Thomas and his family. But as we discussed it further, a sense of excitement began to build. By the end of the evening, all four of us had committed to the cruise with plans to meet the next day at Eleanor's travel agent to book our cabins. For the first time in years, I did something completely for myself. I used some of the money I would have spent on Thomas's mortgage payment and extravagant gifts for a deposit on the cruise. The remaining funds went toward new clothes as I realized most of my wardrobe consisted of practical items for babysitting grandchildren or casual family gatherings. Shopping for myself felt strange, but increasingly empowering. I found myself drawn to colors and styles I would never have considered before, items chosen solely because they pleased me, rather than being practical for my role as mother and grandmother. A bright turquoise sundress for the cruise, comfortable but stylish sandals, even a modest two-piece swimsuit, something I hadn't worn in decades. The evening before our cruise departure, I turned off notifications from Thomas's number on my phone. He had called once since our conversation about Christmas, just to confirm I would still be sending my portion of the mortgage payment on time like usual. I had told him yes, the lie feeling strange on my tongue but necessary for my plan. I had not mentioned finding his phone or seeing the messages that confrontation would come later. As I packed my new clothes into a suitcase that had gathered dust in my closet for years, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was still deep pain at the betrayal, but alongside it something new was blossoming, a sense of self-respect and autonomy I had forgotten was possible. For too long I had made myself small, centered my world around a son who saw me only as a resource to be exploited. Now I was reclaiming my right to happiness and dignity, one small step at a time. The morning of our cruise departure, I looked around my house one last time before locking up. Christmas decorations remained in their storage boxes in the attic, my traditional holiday recipes untouched. Yet somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. Wheeling my suitcase out to Dorothy's waiting car where she and the others were already loading their luggage, I took a deep breath of the crisp winter air. For the first time in 15 years, I was doing exactly what I wanted without considering anyone else's needs above my own. As our ship pulled away from port later that day, I stood at the railing watching the shoreline recede, physically distancing myself from the problems I had left behind. There would be difficult conversations and decisions awaiting my return, but for now I had given myself permission to seek joy rather than continuing to sacrifice at the altar of ungrateful family obligations. The cruise turned out to be one of the most healing experiences of my life. Surrounded by my 3 new friends who truly understood what I was going through, I found myself laughing again sometimes until tears ran down my face. We explored Caribbean ports together, tried snorkeling for the first time in my life, danced at the ship's evening events, and shared long conversations over dinners that someone else had prepared and would clean up afterward. On Christmas morning, instead of watching my grandchildren open the gifts I had carefully chosen while feeling like an unwelcome outsider, I found myself on a white sand beach with turquoise water lapping at my feet. Dorothy, Margaret, Eleanor, and I exchanged small gifts we had brought along, thoughtful tokens that represented our new friendship rather than expensive obligations. To new beginnings, Eleanor toasted, raising her fruity cocktail adorned with a tiny paper umbrella. We all clinked glasses, these 4 women who had begun the holiday season feeling rejected and used by our families, now finding unexpected joy in each other's company. It was only when we returned to the ship and I turned on my phone to check the time that I saw the notifications: 18 missed calls from Thomas over the past 2 days, along with twice as many text messages. The mortgage payment had been due yesterday. I felt a momentary pang of anxiety, followed by a strange sense of calm. This was the natural consequence of years of enabling behavior on my part. Thomas was an adult who had made choices just as I was now making mine. I put the phone away without listening to the voicemails or reading the texts, determined not to let this intrusion spoil our Christmas celebration. The next morning, December 26th, I finally listened to the messages while my friends were still asleep in their cabins. They started casual enough. "Hey Mom, just checking that the mortgage payment went through okay. Call me when you get a chance." The next few grew increasingly concerned. "Mom, the bank says your payment didn't go through. Can you call them right away? We need to get this fixed." By the 10th message, Thomas's tone had shifted to panic. "Mom, where are you? I've been calling all day. The mortgage payment is due today. Please call me back immediately." The final messages revealed dawning comprehension that something more significant was happening. "Mom, I went by your house and you're not there. Your neighbor said you left with a suitcase. What's going on? Please call me, I'm worried." And then the last message left late on Christmas Day. "Mom, is this?" About the text messages with Amanda. "Did you see those when I left my phone at your house? Please call me, we need to talk." So he had figured it out. Part of me felt relieved that I wouldn't have to explain how I had discovered their true feelings about me. Another part dreaded the confrontation that was clearly coming. When our cruise returned to port 5 days later, I had 37 missed calls and countless texts. I had maintained radio silence, needing this time to strengthen my resolve and prepare for what would come next. My friends hugged me tightly at the terminal, extracting promises to meet the following week to continue supporting each other. "Remember what we talked about," Eleanor said firmly. "Boundaries are not punishment, they're self-preservation." I nodded, drawing strength from these women who had become such important parts of my life in such a short time. Then I took a taxi home, mentally bracing myself for whatever awaited me there. I shouldn't have been surprised to find Thomas's car in my driveway when the taxi dropped me off. He must have been watching for my return. As I paid the driver and retrieved my suitcase, my son emerged from his car, his face a storm of emotions. "Where have you been?" he demanded, not even offering to help with my luggage. "I've been worried sick, and the mortgage is late, Mom." "Late. Do you know what that does to our credit score?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. What I saw was not the little boy I had raised with such love and sacrifice, but a 43-year-old man who had grown entitled and selfish, who saw his mother as nothing more than a financial resource to be tapped whenever convenient. "Hello, Thomas," I said, calmly wheeling my suitcase up the driveway. "I was on a cruise with friends. Would you like to come inside so we can talk?" His mouth opened and closed in shock, clearly taken aback by my calm demeanor and the revelation that I had been enjoying a vacation while he was panicking about money. He followed me inside, launching into accusations before I had even set down my purse. "A cruise. You went on a cruise while our mortgage payment was due. What were you thinking? And who are these friends? I didn't even know you had friends you traveled with." I set my suitcase aside and turned to face him. "I saw the text messages between you and Amanda Thomas." The color drained from his face. "What text messages?" "The ones where Amanda called me an annoying old lady and an ATM with legs. The ones where you both laughed about how easy it is to manipulate me with stories about the children. The ones where you discussed excluding me from Christmas while inviting everyone else, including casual neighborhood friends." Thomas sank onto my couch, his anger deflating into something more complex. "Mom, those messages we didn't mean." "Stop," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "No more lies. I've spent years supporting you financially, emotionally, in every way I could. I've given until it hurt, compromised my own retirement security, all because I love you and the children. And all this time, you've been mocking me behind my back, using me for money, and treating me like an inconvenience rather than family." Just then, Thomas's phone rang. He glanced at it, then back at me. "It's Amanda." "Put her on speaker," I said. He hesitated, then complied. Amanda's voice filled the room sharp with irritation. "Thomas, did you find your mother yet? The bank just called about the mortgage again. We need that money like yesterday." "Amanda," Thomas said, his voice strained. "I'm with Mom now. You're on speakerphone." There was a long pause before Amanda spoke again, her tone instantly shifting to sugary sweetness. "Oh, Felicia, thank goodness you're okay. We were so worried about you disappearing right before Christmas like that." "I saw the text messages, Amanda," I said simply. Another long silence. Then, "What text messages?" "Amanda," I sighed suddenly, feeling very tired. "Please don't insult my intelligence further. I know what you both think of me. I know I was excluded from Christmas while you hosted a house full of guests. I know you've both been using me financially for years. That ends today." "Now wait just a minute." Amanda began her voice, taking on the defensive, argumentative tone I had heard her use with service workers. If this is about Christmas, we just wanted some private family time. And as for money, everything we've asked for has been for the children's benefit, for their home and security. The Caribbean cruise you took in September was for the children, I asked. The luxury SUV you bought last month while telling me you couldn't afford your mortgage payment was for the children. Thomas stood up, anger replacing his earlier shock. You had no right to read private messages between me and my wife, and now you're punishing us financially because your feelings got hurt. That's so manipulative, Mom. I almost laughed at the irony of him accusing me of manipulation. Instead, I took a deep breath and spoke the words I had rehearsed many times during quiet moments on the cruise. I am not punishing you, Thomas. I am establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago. I've already spoken to an attorney. I've removed you as my power of attorney. I've restructured my will and created a trust for Jackson and Lily's education that neither you nor Amanda can access for any other purpose. I will no longer be contributing to your mortgage payment or any other household expenses. My financial support ends today. Thomas's face went from angry to panicked in an instant. You can't do that. We're counting on that money. We'll lose the house. You make a combined income of over $150,000 a year, I pointed out. You can afford your mortgage if you adjust your spending priorities. The fact that you've come to depend on my retirement funds to maintain your lifestyle is not my responsibility to fix. But the children, Amanda interjected from the speakerphone. Think about what this will do to your grandchildren. It was the exact manipulation tactic they had discussed in their messages, and hearing it now only strengthened my resolve. I love Jackson and Lily, and I always will, I said firmly. I would like to maintain a relationship with them, but that will depend entirely on you both. If you want me in their lives, it will be as their grandmother who loves them, not as your personal bank. Thomas paced my living room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. His next words came out as a growl. So that's it. You're just cutting us off completely because of a few stupid text messages. No, Thomas. I'm setting healthy boundaries because I've finally recognized that our relationship has become toxic and one-sided. I deserve better treatment from my son. I deserve respect, consideration, and genuine love, not to be treated as a convenience or a financial resource. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, cycling through Thomas's anger, Amanda's attempts at manipulation, periods of blame and accusation, and finally, as they began to accept that I would not be swayed, reluctant, acknowledgement of the new reality. So what now? Thomas finally asked, his voice subdued. Are you just done with us? That depends on you, I replied honestly. I'm done being used and taken for granted. I'm done being excluded from family events while being expected to provide financial support. I'm done with the one-way giving that's defined our relationship for too long. But am I done with you as my son with Jackson and Lily as my grandchildren number? I would like to build a healthier relationship if you're willing. Thomas left shortly after, confusion and resentment still evident in his expression. I knew it would take time for him to process everything, to recognize the validity of my position, and perhaps eventually acknowledge his own role in damaging our relationship. Whether he would be capable of that level of self-reflection remained to be seen. As I unpacked my suitcase that evening, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful, I realized that for the first time in years I had stood up for myself, had refused to accept treatment that diminished my worth and dignity. Whatever happened next with Thomas and his family, I would face it with the same self-respect and clarity that had carried me through this confrontation. The weeks following our confrontation were difficult. Thomas didn't call or text, and I maintained my resolve not to reach out first. This silence was painful but necessary, giving us both space to process the dramatic shift in our relationship. My support group became my lifeline during this period. Meeting weekly with Dorothy, Margaret, and Eleanor, I found strength in their understanding and encouragement. We shared updates on our respective family situations, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through inevitable moments of doubt and grief. I miss my grandchildren, I confessed. During one particularly difficult meeting, tears threatening to spill. I keep wondering if I've done the right thing, if the price of my self-respect is too high. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The right path isn't always the easiest, but remember, you haven't closed the door on your relationship with them. You've just changed the terms from exploitation to mutual respect. I nodded, drawing comfort from her wisdom and the affirming nods of the other women who had become such dear friends. 3 weeks after our confrontation, a letter arrived from Thomas. Not a text or email, but an actual handwritten letter, something he hadn't sent me since summer camp as a child. With trembling hands, I opened it, not knowing whether to expect more accusations or perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've spent these weeks thinking about everything you said and about the kind of son I've been to you. At first, I was just angry and scared about the money, but as days passed, I started remembering all you've done for me throughout my life, how you worked multiple jobs to put me through college, how you were always there when I needed you." The letter continued, acknowledging specific instances of taking advantage of treating me as a financial resource rather than a beloved mother. He admitted that the text conversation with Amanda had been inexcusable regardless of context. "I can't pretend we don't have serious financial adjustments to make now," he wrote. "The truth is, we had become dependent on your contributions and had been living beyond our means in many ways. Amanda and I have had many difficult conversations about our priorities and spending habits. We're meeting with a financial planner next week to create a sustainable budget that doesn't rely on your assistance." Most significantly, he closed with, "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. What I did was wrong on every level. But I want you to know that I'm committed to rebuilding our relationship on better terms if you're willing to give me that chance. No strings attached, no financial expectations. Just a son who misses his mom and wants to do better." I read the letter several times, emotions washing over me in waves. There was relief that Thomas seemed to be taking responsibility, cautious hope for reconciliation, but also healthy skepticism born from years of manipulation. Words were easy. Consistent actions would be the true test of his sincerity. After careful consideration, I called Thomas and suggested meeting on neutral ground, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I was surprised to find him already there, looking more subdued than I had seen him in years. Our conversation was awkward at first, both of us navigating unfamiliar territory in this new dynamic. But gradually, as we spoke openly about the past and possibilities for the future, something shifted. I saw glimpses of the thoughtful, kind son I remembered from before money, and Amanda's influence had corrupted our relationship. "The children have been asking about you," Thomas said eventually. "Would you consider seeing them this weekend? Just a few hours at the park, perhaps?" I agreed, emotion catching in my throat at the thought of reuniting with Jackson and Lily. When Saturday came, I approached the playground with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. What if they had been told negative things about me during our separation? My fears proved unfounded. The moment they spotted me, both children came running, wrapping their arms around me with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Grandma, you were gone for so long, Lily," exclaimed her small hands, patting my cheeks as if to confirm I was really there. Jackson, more perceptive at 7, studied my face. "Dad said you were taking some important time for yourself. He said sometimes grown-ups need to sort things out." I was touched by Thomas's apparently honest but age-appropriate explanation to the children. It suggested a level of maturity and respect I hadn't been sure he possessed. Over the following months, our relationship underwent a careful, gradual rebuilding. There were setbacks and difficult moments, old patterns that threatened to re-emerge and required gentle but firm correction. But there was also genuine effort, particularly from Thomas, who seemed determined to prove his sincerity through consistent actions rather than empty promises. Amanda proved to be a more complex case. Initially resentful and cold, she maintained a distance during family gatherings. I respected this boundary, never pushing for a closeness that had never truly existed between us. Surprisingly, it was her parents who helped shift her perspective during their Easter visit. I had been invited to the Easter celebration, a small gesture that represented significant progress. During dinner, Amanda's father, James, mentioned their own difficult experience with Amanda's older brother. "He saw us as nothing but a checkbook for years," James said frankly, apparently unaware of the parallels to my situation. "We finally had to cut him off financially before he recognized the damage he was doing to our relationship. Best thing we ever did, though. It hurt like hell at the time. He's a better man now, and we're closer than ever." I caught Amanda's eyes across the table, saw something shift in her expression as her father's words illuminated our situation from a different angle. After that day, while we never became best friends, There was a new respect in her interactions with me, a recognition perhaps that parents sometimes make difficult choices out of love rather than spite. Meanwhile, my own life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. The weekly support group evolved into a social club, with the four of us taking classes together at the community center, attending local theater productions, and even planning another cruise for the following winter. I joined a watercolor painting class I had always been curious about, but never had time for when babysitting consumed my schedule. To my surprise, I showed some natural talent, eventually displaying several pieces in a senior center art show. Barbara, my financial advisor, helped me create a new budget focused on my own security and modest enjoyment, rather than supporting Thomas's lifestyle. For the first time in years, I felt financially stable with growing rather than depleting savings. Thomas and Amanda, true to their word, restructured their finances without my contributions. They refinanced their mortgage to a more manageable payment, sold Amanda's luxury SUV for something more practical, and scaled back on extravagant purchases and vacations. These adjustments seemed to create not hardship, but a healthier perspective on what truly mattered. When Christmas approached again, I prepared myself for potential disappointment, unsure whether the progress we had made would extend to holiday invitations. To my pleasant surprise, Thomas called in early December. "We would like you to join us for Christmas this year, Mom," he said, a note of genuine warmth in his voice. "The children are already planning where to hang your stocking. But I want to be clear, this is just about family being together. No expectations of gifts or money, just your presence." That Christmas was different from previous years, simpler in many ways, but richer in authentic connection. The children were delighted with the modest but thoughtful gifts I brought. Thomas and Amanda served a less extravagant but delicious meal. Most importantly, there were no undercurrents of exploitation or resentment, just family enjoying each other's company. As we sat around their living room after dinner, watching the children play with their new toys, Thomas sat beside me on the couch. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes a family work," he said quietly. "For too long, I confused love with what you could give me materially. I missed the whole point." "And what is the point?" I asked. He looked at his children, then back at me, his expression thoughtful. "That real love is about respect and mutual care, not what you can get from someone. That parents continue to teach their children important lessons well into adulthood, sometimes through the hardest conversations." He paused. "Thank you for loving me enough to set boundaries, Mom. I needed that lesson, even though I fought it at first." His words brought tears to my eyes, representing the understanding I had hoped for but wasn't sure would ever come. The journey from exploitation to mutual respect hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been painful confrontations, difficult boundaries to establish, and moments of doubt along the way. But sitting there surrounded by family who now valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I felt a profound sense of peace and rightness. I had learned that true love sometimes requires the courage to say no, that genuine family bonds are built on respect rather than obligation, and that it's never too late to reclaim your worth and dignity. Most importantly, I had discovered that standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing those you love. It means creating the possibility for healthier, more authentic relationships. If you've experienced similar challenges with family members who take advantage, I hope my story gives you courage. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for everyone's well-being. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect your self-respect in family relationships? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect at any age. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, it's never too late to teach people how to treat you with the dignity you deserve.